If we're being honest, the Pharisees can be much like we are today, where we hear the word, but we decide not to listen to it, or we justify our actions. When you're reading Luke chapter 7, the Pharisees, they are in front of Jesus. One Pharisee even invited Jesus to his house. Some of them even seen John the Baptist baptizing people, hearing his message, but will refuse to be baptized by John the Baptist. Why? Because they wanted to validate their own way of thinking instead of following what the word said. Let's get into Bible study. Today, y'all, we are on Luke chapter 7, and I'm going to let you know that anything that I'm using in today's Bible study is linked in the description box, so all the details are there. Baby, I got you. No worries. If you don't follow me on YT, baby, head right over to YT and hit that subscribe button because I look forward to producing these every day. But sometimes 10 minutes is just not enough time. Let's get into Luke chapter 7 because it's good. Luke chapter 7 starts off where a Roman officer demonstrates a new level of faith that Jesus hadn't even seen yet. So in this situation, the Roman officer was actually a good guy by the sound of it, okay? This is an officer he did have some slaves, and one of his slaves was really sick. So he sent people over to Jesus to ask them to come to the Roman officer's home to heal the slave. Now, this is an officer who believed in Jesus. He heard his message. He heard his healing capabilities. So he knew Jesus was capable. He even built synagogues for people to go to worship Jesus or to worship God. The Roman officer sends his people to Jesus, okay? And they're like, listen, we really need your help. This is a good guy. Can you come? When Jesus is on his way, the Roman officer sends another message. He sends his friends. And he sends his friends to tell Jesus, listen, he says, I'm not even qualified, to be honest, to be in your presence. This is the Roman officer. I'm not even qualified to be in your presence. Can you heal him from where you are? This is a huge level of faith because if you remember in previous chapters of Luke, people were coming and they were touching Jesus. They were getting in proximity and they were touching him. But this Roman officer understood that Jesus didn't even have to be in the vicinity to heal. He understood that Jesus' power was so big that he didn't necessarily have to just touch him, that he could speak that Jesus could heal him and he would be healed. Isn't that wild? For us, it's so powerful because this just demonstrates the power of Jesus and also the faith of a mustard seed. If you believe that Jesus can enter into your situation and change it, you may not in that moment need to see the change happening in front of you. Just by you speaking that, just by you giving that to God, just by you laying that at Jesus' feet, this is where true change happens. This is where true faith develops. And I think that was a good call for us. Then it says soon after, Jesus heals a widow's son. So this is a woman who is going through extreme devastation. Her husband has passed away, and so she's a widow, and her only son has passed away. Now, as we recall from previous chapters, we talked about the dynamic of women biblically, and their son was so important. Carrying your name is so important. So her son passing away and her husband passing away, this could mean that she could have no income. It could mean that she's reduced to just begging for food. This could be a huge financial, not only emotional, but a huge financial devastation to this woman, because if the family member didn't step up and take care of her, she's left on her own. Jesus sees her and he has great compassion. So he sees her in the midst of a funeral. Now keep in mind, funerals during this time lasted about 30 days. They would even hire mourners to walk around with them to cry aloud in this funeral so that people would know what's going on and people could see what was happening to that family. Jesus sees this and he has extreme compassion for her. So much so that she doesn't have to ask for her son to be born again, for him to be raised from the dead. Jesus sees her and her devastation and he raises her son from the dead to the point to where her son gets up and starts walking and talking. In this situation, the dead man, he didn't earn anything to be brought back to life. He didn't earn anything. And I think that's a good call for us too, because we didn't earn our salvation. Jesus laid his life down for us. We didn't earn that, nor do we deserve it. But we do have the opportunity to accept it. We do have the opportunity to accept what God is doing in our life, what he is doing in our mind, what he is doing in our heart, what he is even doing in our family. We have the opportunity to accept it. And I'm even thinking about it from the standpoint of the widow. Losing someone she was married to and receiving extreme compassion from Jesus Christ. And I think for us, or for me per se, I have been tied to things that I've lost. I've been tied to an image that I lost. I've been tied to a job that I lost. But allowing Jesus, allowing God into that situation, allowing him to take over and to feel the hole that it left in my heart, that has been game changing for me. So let me ask you, what have you lost in your life that God can come in and you can allow him to fill that void? This one is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I'm going to tell you why this one next in Luke chapter 7, verse 18. We also read it in Mark, and we also read it in Matthew, but it's when Jesus eases John's doubts. So John is John the Baptist, the one who was responsible for telling everyone that the Messiah was coming. John the Baptist baptized so many people. John the Baptist was so powerful in his message and telling people to repent and to turn to God. Yet when John the Baptist was in prison, he had a moment of doubt. And so John the Baptist sent his disciples to Jesus and say, are you the one, Jesus, that are we waiting on? Are you the one? Are you the Messiah? Or should we be waiting for someone else? And I think this was good for me because even the strongest believers, John the Baptist was the strongest believer. Even the strongest believer can have doubts. And in those doubting situations, we have to look at Jesus's actions, God's actions in our life. What does his word say? What has he done for you? So when you're looking at this in this story, Jesus, in response to John's question, he didn't get mad. He sent to John his actions. He told those messengers, go back and tell them what I've been doing. Tell them the blind are seeing. Tell them the lame are walking. Tell them even the people who deny me, they're going to have something coming back. So I love that because in situations for us, when we're doubting, God, I know you showed up last time, but I'm scared that you're not going to show up this time. It's our opportunity to look at what he's done in the past, look at his actions. We always say actions speak louder than words, right? Our word is so powerful, but how is God showing up in your life, in the life of people around you? How is he showing up in the past? You think if he didn't show up last time, he ain't going to show up this time? Baby, your father's too good. He's going to show up. So Jesus, after John's disciples leave, Jesus praises John the Baptist, and he even says, John is the man whom the scriptures refer to when they say, I'm sending my messenger ahead of you, and he will prepare the way for you. He says that there's no greater man that lived than John. When the people heard this, even the tax collectors agreed that God's way was right, because they had been baptized by John the Baptist too. But the Pharisees and the experts of the religious law, they refused to get baptized by John the Baptist. They didn't want to because they were stuck in their ways. Their hearts were hardened. Have you heard a message before that God had someone else tell you, or you read in your word, but you refused to believe it because of how hardened your heart was? Release that to God. We don't want to be like the Pharisees. Last story that we see in Luke chapter 7 is where a Pharisee invites Jesus over for dinner. So customary, when you had a guest back in the day, it was huge. And in customary, when a guest came over, there was a couple things that people normally did. Number one is they would wash the guest's feet. Number two is they would greet that person with a kiss, like on the cheek or on the forehead, like a welcome in. Number three is they would anoint that person with oil, olive oil, especially if they were like a person of authority or a person of like high influence. They would definitely anoint them with oil. And last but not least, they would provide them food and drink. So having a guest was so important. If you remember the importance of it, think about the story of Lot whenever the two men came to Lot's house and how Lot was so protective over those two guests, more so than he was about his own daughters. That tells you how important guests really were at that time. So at the Pharisee's house for dinner, an immoral woman comes in, right? And she does everything that the homeowner should have did. She doesn't have any water to wash Jesus' feet, so she washes his feet with her tears and wipes off his feet with her hair. She kisses his feet. This is pretty customary because normally people, they would sit at like a dinner table if they were guests, and they would sit almost on like a couch, and their elbow would be on the table and their feet would kind of be propped up. So it'd be easy for her to kiss his feet without touching the table. The Pharisee man, still in disbelief, says Jesus can't be a prophet, because if he was a prophet, he would know that the woman touching him is super sinful. Jesus immediately has to address this because he asks him a question. If someone gives one person $500 and he gives another person $50, which one does he value more? The man says, obviously the one he gave more money to. And Jesus explained to him, this woman may be full of sins. This is why she is so faithful. But a person who doesn't have any sin, they may not be able to express their faithfulness. He's calling out those who think they're perfect. It's hard for them to accept the grace of God because they think they're perfect. But those who are flawed and forgiven understand that perfection only comes through God. They understand that forgiveness is so valuable. The Pharisees still didn't understand, but the woman did. So I ask you, which one are you? Are you the woman or the Pharisee? Let me know in the comments which verse stood out to you, and I'll see you tomorrow for Luke chapter 8. Bye, y'all.